All right. Hey, so once again, thank you everybody for being here. My name is Veronica Yao, and I am the career coach behind Atypical Careers. I'm so excited today to be bringing a neurodivergent career success story featuring the one and only Desiree Green. And this is just something for us to really get to know what what different neurodivergent experiences are and how we can learn from one another so that we can survive and hopefully thrive this wonderful world of work that we live in. So definitely feel free to chat in the comments, but I wanted to introduce myself first. So as I said, my name is Veronica and I am the career coach behind Atypical Careers. I'm sure a lot of you have come from the Facebook group as well, which is called Neurodivergent Careers and Job Hunting. And that's a community of now over 60,000 people, neurodivergent professionals from around the world, sharing their experiences, supporting one another with challenges in the workplace and everything like that. So with that said, I'm so excited to host this space once a month so that we can discuss things from a neurodivergent point of view, and we can really learn from one another's experiences. So that's why today I'm so excited to be introducing Desiree Green, who is, and actually Desiree, maybe you might be best to introduce yourself. So why don't you go ahead and do that?
Awesome. Thank you so much, Veronica, and thank you for inviting me into your community. I've joined the Facebook group and it's been so great to see so many people jump in and provide resources to neurodivergence. So it's been a pleasure to be in the group. So thank you, and thank you for inviting me here today. As Veronica mentioned, my name is Desiree Green. I am the owner, I'm a consultant at Emerald Earnings, where we support women-led businesses. I started my career journey well, you know what? I got into the workforce when I was 14, 15 years old. I started in the hospitality industry and I fell in love with it. I loved being able to connect with the guests that were coming in. I enjoyed connecting with my coworkers. And from 16 years old, I was creating training resources that were put in 4 different locations. So right off the hop, I had that excitement and that determination. I ended up staying in the hospitality industry, and I was a consultant for a hospitality firm that did about 25 million a year in revenue. I would work closely with general managers and their management teams, training and developing their leadership teams, as well as giving them resources to train their staff. I got into that position through really pushing myself and pushing my bosses in the right way. And I loved it. I was always recognized for my hospitality, recognized for how I treat people and how I was able to build my teams. So one of the reasons why Veronica wanted to chat with me today was because I I was undiagnosed, and unknowingly I built a management team of about 15 neurodivergents. And when I learned about what ADHD was and how it presented in women, I thought, well, that sounds like me. Sounds like I have ADHD. And I did get diagnosed, and I was able to recognize the signs in the team that I developed. And we were all either self-diagnosed or officially diagnosed shortly after that. So it was really cool to see how a team of neurodivergents can work together, and we became one of the most recognized teams across Canada. I won awards for my location, for, again, hospitality and our metrics. So yeah, that's a little bit about me and a little bit about what we'll be diving into today.
It's amazing. And, how many people can say that they were a neurodivergent manager who was leading a team of neurodivergent professionals? That must have been such a unique experience. Can you tell me a little bit more about, that experience from a managerial point of view and, what that was like? Because that kind of sounds like the dream for a lot of us.
Yeah, it was so starting off my career when I knew that I wanted to grow and develop in hospitality, I recognized that and I tried to push hard to grow. And I remember applying for my first leadership position, and the manager that I applied with said, "Well, you're not serious enough. You're not going to take this role seriously." And she didn't give me the opportunity. So I fizzled out there. I stopped caring, to be honest. I put in so much effort and I thought that I was like making all the right steps and doing what I could to prove that I would be a good leader. But ultimately, she basically rained on my parade and it took that excitement away from me. I had serious RSD about it, but still with my company under another leader, they actually asked me to take on a position because they saw my spark and they saw my excitement. So they wanted to bring me over to their location as a leader. And that's when I really started to thrive. And every 2 years, I was getting promoted. I think one of the most challenging things was being able to balance the intense feelings of wanting to push myself and wanting to be the best, but also maintain a work-life balance. And at that point, I didn't. I gave everything that I had to my employers, and it was tough, but I did get the promotions that I was looking for. And once I became a general manager and I had more control over being able to provide other people with a work-life balance, that was something that I really pushed for with my managers, was making sure that you're taking that time to yourself, because they were the same as me. They gave everything they had. They had ADHD. They were hyper focusing. They pushed super hard. They were super excited, super passionate. And I knew from personal experience that struggle. And I made sure that they took their 2 days off in a row and they shut their phone off. Like, I don't want to hear from you. You don't want to hear from me. Like, focus on your family, focus on your friends. And so that was really important to me. And I think that that really contributed to why we had such a successful team.
Mm. Wow, that's so amazing. And can you imagine, like, having a manager who would be willing to work with this is what we talk about with flexible hours. Sometimes, the word flexible hours can mean so many different things depending on the context. And, and it depends on the individual, right? Like I remember that there was one place that I worked, and we would do a conference at like this huge convention center in Toronto. And we would do it for 3 days. And after that, they would give us like a day off. Now, for some people, that might be like plenty, but for some people, you might need more time to recover from something like that. So it's really wonderful to kind of hear a manager who's willing to see things from that point of view and really validate those experiences. Thank you so much, Desiree. That's a great way to kick things off. And I do have a couple of questions here. If there's any other people who have questions along the way, feel free to put them in the comments and we'll try and address them as we go. But first off, why don't we start with this one? What advice do you have for neurodivergent folks who are trying to survive in the corporate world?
Great question. Navigating the corporate world as a neurodivergent can be super challenging. My biggest piece of advice is to understand your strengths and leverage them. Create systems that work for you and don't be afraid to ask for help and accommodations to help you succeed. It's important to As somebody with ADHD and undiagnosed ADHD, I really had to build a lot of systems to support myself without even realizing that's what I was doing. But having that awareness and understanding that your brain functions differently and you have to do things different than a neurotypical is, I think, key to being able to build those systems. I also have a strong sense of justice and a moral compass. So I really had to learn how to pick my battles wisely. And I had to know when to speak up. And I also had to know when to preserve my silence. And that was tough. Sometimes having to, keep my mouth shut when all I wanted to do was say, this isn't the way that it needs to be handled, or this, I have an option that will get us to where we need to go a little bit quicker, but I needed to let other people figure that out and let my bosses be able to figure that out in certain situations.
Mm-hmm. Those are some tough lessons to learn, especially because we have such instincts, like a lot of us, I'm sure, in this chat would agree that we have a hard time standing by when we disagree with what's happening in the workplace, or even asking why something is sometimes seen as a challenge to authority, when we're actually just trying to figure out what our motivation is behind doing this task. Like, yes, you want me to do this task, but tell me why, so I understand the bigger picture. One of the things that I want to go back to and actually mention, you mentioned systems a lot and creating those structures to support you so that, inevitably when you're having a down day or something like that, you have something to lean on. Can you give some examples of structures that have worked for you, or structures that you've seen work for other people that we can use as inspiration?
Yeah. So the biggest one that I use now in my day-to-day is and this works for some people with ADHD and it doesn't work for others. But it really works for me, is having compassion towards myself and understanding that I am going to have high energy days and I'm going to have low energy days. So in my business, when I have low energy days, that means I still have things that I need to do to move the needle. I do a lot of payroll, so people still need to get paid no matter what. I pay a lot of companies bills, and those bills need to get paid no matter what. So those types of things are non-negotiables that have to get done on a low energy day. But I have enough compassion for myself to say, if that's all I get done, that's all I get done. The other thing that I do is build my team to be able to support each other, because typically if I'm having a low energy day, my team will have high energy days and they'll be able to pick things up. So I'm all about understanding the different roles and tasks so that we can all support each other and help each other out in those low energy days. And when I was leading a team of neurodivergents, we would have a quick spreadsheet that had a list of all the tasks, and we had person A and person B. So when person A couldn't handle it or needed some support, then person B would take that on. And that worked really well to make sure that everything was still getting done, and also give people the flexibility to take some pressure off of them.
It's really great insight. I'd like to move on to the next question here, so let's keep going. What advice do you, oh, sorry, I'm reading the old one. What were some of the things you did to support neurodivergent employees as their manager? So I know you touched on a few things, but maybe let's dive in a little deeper.
Yeah, sounds good. So I really focused on creating a supportive environment to help my team thrive. So focusing on open communication, I would never shame anybody or get upset at anybody. I would never raise my voice. I would never get upset at somebody for not doing something. It was always the why. Like, okay, well, we have this deadline. What happened? How can I support you? Next time, let me know a little bit sooner so that I can support you. And just always being hands-on, always being understanding, and always being supportive, regardless of the situation. I think also providing flexibility is huge, letting people dictate their own schedules. The job still needs to get done and tasks do have deadlines, but I think it's huge for people with ADHD to have some sort of flexibility. Some people will wait till the day before a deadline to get it done, but it got done. And I think that as managers, we need to understand that we need to give people the autonomy to choose when they're going to work and when they're going to get the task done, because that's when they're going to get it done the best. And then also recognizing burnout signs in my team, and everybody has a different tell. So I would really get to know my team and understand when they were about to burn out and make sure that they were able to take an extra day off or give them whatever support that they needed. If they were starting to feel overwhelmed, maybe it was moving a task to somebody else, taking it on myself, or giving them some extra time off, sending them home an hour early to spend time with their family.
Absolutely. And it's so wonderful to hear that, like, and I'm sure a lot of people in this call are probably we're probably coming in thinking like, are there even any good managers out there who know how to support their team? But this is really good information, and I hope that this information gets out there to other managers who are looking to support their neurodivergent professional or just adding more neurodiversity to the concept of managing and keeping that kind of stuff in mind. I think I'd really love to hear, because I'm sure that from a employee perspective, they're probably wondering, okay, but how can I get my manager to support me in this way? How can I ask for these supports? So from your experience being both an employee and an employer who is neurodiverse, what are some tips that you might give for somebody who's asking for an accommodation or an adjustment or something to support them?
When I have come up through the ranks, when I was still new to leadership and being able to find my voice, the biggest thing that I did, and my mom gave me this advice, was to write it down and submit it. So one thing that we struggle with ADHD is we hear something and we just want to jump to it and we want to talk about it and we want to get it out. But that's not the typical corporate model for things. So having somebody that you can bounce things off of and bring your requests to talk about them, and then come home or do it at work and sit down and write out a request for something. I found that this way I was able to articulate exactly what I needed without getting distracted by whatever it was going on. Maybe it was going off on a tangent, or something would happen in the workplace and we would get distracted by that. Sitting down, focusing on it, writing it down, and submitting it was the best way that I was able to articulate things. And then as a manager, I just liked when people spoke to me and was honest with me and let me know exactly where they were at. I'm not sure a lot of workplaces accept that kind of like relaxed conversational vibes. So I just preferred having a conversation, having somebody be open and honest, because I feel like that needs to be the foundation of any relationship, whether it's work or something else. And conversations just need to be had, whether they're tough or not. If you're having a conversation in person, tone is a huge thing for people with ADHD to be focusing on. So often we can come across as abrupt and quick and maybe rude, like when we're asking well, why does this need to be done this way? We need to make sure that we're recognizing that tone and how we're asking it and how we're approaching the situation, and making sure that we're approaching it in a friendly, welcoming way.
Mm-hmm. Some really good tips in there. And a reminder that working, especially in the corporate world where you come from, there's a lot of pressure to kind of fit into a certain persona, and a certain, there are certain ways of doing it, and you have to adjust your tone, and you have to adjust the way that you ask people, and this can be really exhausting for a lot of neurodivergent people. But that being said, some people might find ways to adapt to it. So if you want to go into this kind of work, you do need to go in with a certain willingness to play their game a little bit, and kind of have those conversations, maybe not in as direct a way that you like, or something like that. But there are other allowances that you can make to be a little bit more authentic at work and balance that out so that you're not heavily masking all day. It's not for everybody, but definitely this is part of why it's so important to do the work and really figure out, what kind of environment would you thrive in? And once you select that environment, it's not going to be perfect for you. So how can you bridge those gaps? How can you make sure that, you're well supported? And, going back to what Desiree said earlier about building those support systems for yourself so that when you inevitably have a down day or something like that, you have something to lean on, you have something to keep you up so that you don't fall all the way down and you don't have to work your way back up as much. So that's just what I wanted to add to that. I'd love to move on to the next question. So why don't we keep it rolling here? Let's see. How did you get others at work to see your neurodivergent traits as a good thing?
I think recognizing your strengths, again, is huge. And something that people with ADHD are really good at is quick thinking and strong problem-solving skills. I remember sitting in a boardroom multiple times, and this is where imposter syndrome has gotten the best of me. But sitting in a boardroom where all of these people are trying to figure out a solution to a problem, and I'm sitting here like, here's the solution. But I'm thinking, well, none of them have touched on it, so my solution must not be good. So I kept my mouth shut and let all these ideas fly around, and I'm like, none of these are gonna work. None of these are making sense. How come nobody has said my original idea? So finally I say it, and people are like, oh my gosh, that's such a good idea. Did you come up with that? And that's the one that we went with. Because I think a lot of times neurodivergent people see A, B, C, D, where people with ADHD see A, D, F, G, Z, and we know the solution so quickly. And I describe it as having a spider web in your head where you can just swing idea to idea. So using those and not being afraid to speak up and not being afraid to share your ideas is huge. And that's, a huge reason why my employers did recognize my potential, is because I did bring up solutions to problems very quickly after I realized the imposter syndrome thing. So yeah, being able to showcase your strengths is huge, and that's going to be different for everybody.
Absolutely. And, I think I would just add on to that you can't really embrace what you're good at if you don't identify it yourself, and if you're not aware of it yourself. So doing the internal work is so important and so key to professional development, because if you don't know your value, how are you going to convince somebody else of your value? How are you going to convince somebody else that you're good at this? So the first thing is really accepting that. And that's really where the imposter syndrome comes in. You got to fight that. You have something that not a lot of other people have. And working in the professional world, you realize how many people get away with doing so little when we're over here stressing about, you know, like, are we doing enough? Are we doing enough to earn our keep? Or, you know, did they make, you know, to validate the fact that they hired you or something like that, you know? But in reality, if you really look at it, like, there's a lot of people out there who are doing so little and contributing and not contributing much and still, you know, being content with their day. So I like to think of that every time I feel like I'm falling short or something like that, because you know, like, sometimes it's our own standards that are holding us back, you know, our own personal standards. And so really reframing that is a good thing to do. Anyway, so that was great. I'd love to move on here. So yeah, let's dive in a little bit more on this. Did you burn out in your corporate job, and how did you deal with it?
Yeah, I burnt out multiple times. And it was always such a struggle, and I would work and work until the point where I needed 2 or 3 weeks off to be able to recover from it. And my entire time off was spent trying to regulate my nervous system and bring myself back to a baseline. And yeah, I did that so many times, and I really struggled with that. And then I had to learn how to recognize symptoms of my own burnout and protect my space, protect my boundaries, and protect my peace. Now I can recognize it, and I can just say I'm taking tomorrow off, or I'm um, going to take it a little easier and communicate that with my team. One thing that I really notice is, and you know what, I'm still a little struggling with this cycle, to be honest, is I'll feel really good and I'll book a bunch of things for like the next week, and my week will be so full. And at the end of that week, I will be so drained that I need to like, and then I'll have other things booked, and I need to like either reschedule or maybe cancel on friends, and that's really tough. So what I'm really trying to focus on is like limiting myself to certain things that I'm scheduling. And as somebody with ADHD, I also have really high energy, and I bleed energy. Like, people will say, I feel your energy. Like, I don't need coffee when you're around. Like, you're it. And I really have to like monitor how much I'm putting out and like cap certain things. So maybe I'll only schedule 3 things in a week so that like I am not burning myself out. And if I am feeling really good on one of those days I didn't book something, then maybe I can do something spontaneous and like not burn out that way.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. And, you know, that's a big thing with neurodivergent people, is that we have a limited amount of energy, and we need to use our energy smartly. We need, like, just like you would manage your finances and your money, like, you also need to account that for your time, your energy, and, you know, assign, like, you know, I like to assign a number value to my hours. And then I think, you know, is this worth $30? Or is this like, and think about it that way, because the fact is that, you know, with employers, it's easier for self-employed people to kind of like, you know, set those boundaries, just because, you know, we're in control of our schedules. But when you're employed by someone else, you know, that's where it becomes so important to be able to advocate for yourself and be able to you know, articulate what you need, and in a way that shows that, yes, I have value, but that doesn't, you know, yes, I need support, but that doesn't take away from the fact that I have value. In fact, what employers should be doing is, you know, everybody that they hire is an asset that they've invested in, and then they should be asking, what do I need to do to make my investment as profitable, as productive as possible? And then you give them those things so that they can do that. And part of that is making sure that they have the energy and the space for when those things in life inevitably happen, and so you're not already at your limit and you're not trying to go surpass your limit. So, making sure that you have a cushion of time and energy and space and not overextending yourself is really, really important for neurodivergent people. So, yeah, let's see here. Now, oh, yeah, this is a great one. How did you know that leaving your career to start a business was the right thing to do?
All right, well, I'm going to tie this into what you were just talking about, actually. So I was a consultant and we had 10 restaurants that I would support. In one of the restaurants, a decision was made to promote somebody that wasn't necessarily ready for the role, but she could have been with support. Fortunately, the owners of the company didn't provide that support and didn't provide that open communication. And that resulted in the manager burning out, and she got really depressed. And I recognized that and I understood that. And I said, well, let's provide her with 5 or 10 therapy sessions. Let's invest $1,000 and let's send her to therapy to help her handle the new role of now having 80 employees post-pandemic. And that's a really stressful role. She's operating a multi-million-dollar establishment and she's really having a tough time stepping into that role. Let's send her to therapy. No, they refused. And it broke my heart because that's what needed to be done. And that restaurant could have ran very well with her. Instead, they made a series of terrible, terrible decisions. And that ultimately led to me deciding to leave the company. And those decisions, some of them were not handling sexual harassment complaints properly, to not recognizing what their employees needed. And it was in that moment that I realized that I've come so far and I've changed so much, and I was able to really make an impact where I was, but that was as far of it, that's as much of an impact as that I was going to make in that role. And that's when I decided to leave that company and start Emerald Earnings so that I could support women-led businesses and help them make decisions that make them money, but also make them feel good, and where I can be an employer that supports my neurodivergent team in what they need. And I literally have a text from my employee yesterday. She's like, dealing with some mental health issues, so I haven't been working this much. Sorry, I haven't been working as much. And I just replied with, your mental health is the absolute most important thing. Focus on that. Let's talk when you're ready.
Mm-hmm.
And nothing else matters except for her mental health. And that's what employers need to be doing. And that's what management team and leadership teams need to be doing. And, that's how I figured that I can make the best change in the business world and with managers and leaders, is to start my own business and support women in business to help them make those decisions and know that they don't have to follow the typical corporate workplace habits.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and something that rings true to me. Maybe you can tell me if this rings true for you, Desiree. But if you're a high achiever, you're an overperformer, and you naturally want to give 150% to your work and everything, then maybe if you're tired of doing all that extra work for free, you might as well consider starting your own business and building something up that you can actually benefit from that works for you. That said, oh, my light just went out. With that said, there is also benefit to staying with employers. Obviously, if you're not like super, like if you're okay doing like not the basic amount, but an acceptable amount of work, and you want to keep a work and home life separate and everything, then maybe employment is the right way to go. But the most important thing is making sure that you separate your personal value from your work persona. And I'll say that in terms like, when I first started out in my 20s in my marketing career, I thought that how well I performed at work was directly tied to my value as a human being. That's what I wanted to say. And every time that I didn't go above and beyond, every time that I didn't meet an expectation or I got negative feedback or something, it was a call on my value. The most important thing that we as neurodivergent people can do to, let's face facts, we're often surviving the workplace. We're just trying to make ends meet. And one of the best things we can do is separate our perception of, our value is tied to our work, and just recognize that work is work. It's just something you do during the day. And yes, it absolutely has value, but it does not need to define who you are. And as soon as you're able to kind of separate that, it becomes so much easier to see things objectively and make decisions that are more strategic and more and will benefit you in the long run. Because ultimately, as much as me and Desiree are, we love our work and we are absolutely devoted to what we do, we also need to do the work of making sure that we know that we don't work because it's the meaning of our lives. We do it for other reasons. We do it for our families. We do it for our own sense of fulfillment, our pursuit of knowledge, anything like that. So it's really important to become, tied to the why behind why you do work, and realize that, it's just a vehicle to get you to where you need to be. So that was my 2 cents. Do you have any thoughts about that, Desiree?
Yeah, and I think that's something that has to be worked on constantly.
Mm,
I started separating myself from my work maybe 4 years ago, and that's something that I still have to work on every single day. And I have to remind myself of that. And, as being a business owner, and my husband is a business owner as well. So we both have ADHD, by the way. So it's an interesting household. But we have to really like catch ourselves when we're starting to focus too much on work. And, fortunately we have each other to help bring that up and bring that to our attentions. But it's really, you always have to remind yourself that I am not my work, and these are all the things that I love about me that have nothing to do with work. And it's a really tough separation.
It is, for sure. But one of the most valuable lessons that we can learn, for sure, because our society is going to
Absolutely.
tell us differently. They're going to tell us that you're only as valuable as the output of your work. But that's not why we live. That's not why we're here,
No.
right? It's just a means to an end. And bonus if you find passion in it, and bonus if you absolutely love what you do. But if you're just doing it to be content and so you can go home and do the things that you actually love, that is okay too. And there is absolutely no shame in that.
Absolutely. I just want to touch, because you said, if you're a high achiever that wants to give 150%, one thing that I noticed was a huge cycle of was giving 150% and thinking that I had to maintain that. So once I recognized, wait, if I give 150% one day and then only give 50% the next day, I'm still just giving the same amount of effort as my peers. And so that was a way that I was able to, and that was how I looked at things before I figured out the high energy and the low energy days. And I had to be okay with that and come to terms with that.
Hmm. That's definitely good. I have similar stories, but I do want to get moving because we have a couple more questions I'd like to get through. Here's a great one. What are some of the most important lessons that you've learned from your career so far? I guess we just had one, but do you have any other wisdom that you'd like to share?
Yeah. The most important lesson that I've learned from my career is the value of people and relationships and the necessity of maintaining a work-life balance, and also making sure that you're aligning your work with your views. Um, it's really important for me to build strength in the relationships that I have, whether that's work or professional. And um, that's where I've always been able to find my happiness, was with people, and recognizing like what I'm the task that I'm doing right now might not necessarily be the most like beneficial thing or whatever, but I always found a way to tie it to how that was helping other people. So an example of is, when I used to GM a restaurant, lots of people will just see that as, well, you're just serving food and serving drinks to people. But for me, that was not how I viewed my role. And so the first way that I viewed my role was, number one, I am typically hiring. I have a lot of teenagers, so a lot of 16-year-olds, a lot of university students, and then I have people that have made this their career as well. And I always viewed it as, I am typically the first employer that a lot of people will have. And I want to give them the best start to the workforce with the most optimistic attitude that they can have. And I've had managers that are like, well, they need to know how the real world is. And they'd be like so tough and stern but for me, it was about like nurturing them and building that work ethic, and, you know, letting them know that their work doesn't define them, just everything that we're talking about. But what does define them is how they're handling their work and how they're viewing their own work. So that was my first thing in my job. Was That's the first way I view it, is I am building people and I'm a huge part of their life, because I get to support them through so many different avenues. And, working with university students, they get to see my management and my management style, and they're going to university to start their careers. And one day they might be a manager or a leader, and I want them to use me as an example of the leader that they want to be, not the leader that they don't want to be, right? So I got to see them grow. I have had some employees that I've seen them graduate from high school, and I've seen them graduate from university, and that's been so rewarding and so fulfilling to me. The other way that I viewed it was being a cornerstone in a community, and I was recognized on the news multiple times for the amount of community engagement we had. So we would work with the Parkinson's Foundation here. We would work with the Boys and Girls Club. I would organize like basketball games, and we would go play with the Boys and Girls Club, and we would bring them for tours of the facility. And I would work with the older kids on how to build a resume and how to go through the interview process and what it's like if you do get hired and the different positions that they could have. I would also speak with the Alberta government pretty much on the same sort of things. And I think that regardless of the position that you're doing, you can find the beauty and you can find the joy in it and you can find what makes you happy and hold on to that and push for that.
For sure. And again, it goes back to knowing yourself and knowing what motivates you and what sparks that joy. One of the things that I like to ask people is, what's something that, brings you joy and what gives you that feeling of like excitement to do it. And for some people it's hobbies or art or performing or I don't know, like doing math. Like I like that's not me, but finding that and then finding what the root of that is, whether it's helping people, whether it's, the pursuit of knowledge, whether it's, wanting to leave a legacy that you can be proud of, things like that. And then finding ways to reframe the work that you do on a daily basis so that it contributes to that. Now, if your work is completely out of alignment of your values, like Desiree said, then of course it's going to feel really tough to go to work every single day. You can find ways to survive it, but if you really want to thrive and if you really want to find something that aligns with you, you got to do the work first. You got to do that internal work, whether it's with a coach or whether it's on your own or with friends or whatever. But you got to figure out that you got to do that internal work first, or else you're never going to know how to identify an opportunity that aligns for you that will bring you that level of satisfaction. And I think that, Desiree, you were very fortunate to fall into something that hospitality, which is essentially the whole point, is like helping people and serve and supporting people and stuff. So, and you've managed to translate that into your career now as a business owner, whether you're helping clients with their books or designing marketing materials for them or their website or anything like that. So, it's really about, reframing and finding that spark in what you're doing.
Absolutely.
Yeah. All right. Let's see. We have time for a few more. What are some tips you can offer neurodivergent professionals who are applying to work for large companies? So I guess, what do you think managers are looking for? Like what can they do?
I think right now the marketplace is pretty tough to find positions. I think, yeah, that's pretty well recognized and well known right now. And I think like adapting your resume to like tailor the position, writing a cover letter, it's tough. And you know what? If you want to use AI to write your cover letters, if that's going to just help you get a little bit quicker, and then proofread them and like edit them how you want them to, then do that. Like find systems that work for you to be able to like do it quickly. I know cover letters are really tough to write, especially when you're trying to write a lot of them. Um, I'm a huge advocate to use AI, so if you got to use it to help you out, then let it be. But yeah, tailoring your resume and your cover letter. And then through your interviews, like practice all of your responses to different kinds of questions and be able to have some situations. And I think it's a little bit more prominent in me, but I also think that it is an ADHD thing where the memory is just not, it's harder. We have our working memory isn't as um great. So for me, being in an interview, when people ask me like a specific situation, it's like, oh man, I don't even know. Like, I know that I have like 20 of these situations and I've probably handled them pretty well, but like I can't recall it right off the hop. So like think back and like maybe write down the story, rehearse it to a friend or whatever, but just like rehearse it and get to know some like example stories, really like think about yourself and why you want a position, and then also ask questions to the employer in the interview. You don't need to tell them that you have ADHD, so you don't need to bring it up and like ask questions specific on that, but you can ask, well, what's your management style? How do you handle like what makes a successful team to you? And how will you be measuring my success? um, how do they handle disciplinary procedures? And you can ask them those things in the interview and also get to know them a little bit. I think that that's one, it's great for you to know like the kind of workplace that you're getting into. And then two, it just will really impress the employer to be asking questions.
Absolutely. And I can't help but chime in because I have so many opinions on this as well, because obviously this is what I do as a career coach. And it can be tough because, when we approach interviews and when we approach applying for jobs, we often do it with a mindset of how can I get them to like me? How can I get them to see me as this? And it makes us feel like we need to be performative, and we need to and that makes us feel inauthentic, which is a really yucky feeling for neurodivergent people especially. So it's so important to actually, once again, it goes back to knowing yourself. I like to say that interviews become easier when you know yourself as well as your most special interest. So if your special interest was like plants or something, and I asked you a question about like this dandelion over here, like this flower or whatever, you would probably have no trouble rifling off what you know about it, and you're passionate about it, about it and everything like that. But when we're asked about ourselves, well, the reason we have trouble coming up with answers is because we haven't thought about ourselves that much, not in that context anyway. So really asking yourselves those deep questions. Obviously, what Desiree said, have some stories that are well rehearsed in your back pocket that could, apply to a number of different scenarios. But it becomes easier the more you ask yourself those hard questions and you really understand what your strengths are, what your limitations are, and even having a clear idea of what kind of workplace you want to go into. And then, it becomes more about asking questions to the employer to see how they measure up to your ideal standard, rather than waiting and seeing what they say to you and then wondering, okay, well, is this good enough for me? Is this good enough for my next move or whatever? If you know what you're looking for, it becomes easier to make those small decisions along the way. So I just wanted to add that in there.
Absolutely.
Awesome. I think we have time for one more. If there's one more question here, let's see. Okay. Oh, this is great. I love that we're ending on this one. Do you have advice for neurodivergent professionals who are trying to advance their careers into leadership roles?
Absolutely. To advance into leadership roles, I think it's really important to develop your communication and your presentation skills, build a strong case for your ideas and articulate them very clearly. Seek out mentors who support your career and support your goals, and continuously be working on your strengths and addressing the challenges that you have. Like I mentioned before, anytime that I wanted to, I think I mentioned this, anytime that I don't think I mentioned this, sorry. Anytime that I did want to move up in my career, I would write a letter of interest and I would shoot my shot. And sometimes it worked and sometimes it didn't, and I would wait for the next one. But I always wrote it down. I never just like approached my boss and say like, hear about an opening and be like, oh my God, it would be perfect for that. Like this is why, blah, blah, blah. Like I would make it very very formal and write it like send an email. I think that it just helped me really, again, like when you're sitting down and you have to write something, you're reflecting and you're thinking on yourself, and you have to ask yourself the question, well, why do I want this job? Why would I be a good fit for it? How would it benefit the company for me to be in this role? And what are some challenges that I think I would have with the role? But how do I also think that I'm going to overcome them? Mm-hmm. And you have to sit down and you really have to think about it. And then all of your thoughts are, what's the word that I'm looking for? They're cohesive. They're not scattered. They're easy for your employer to read and understand. And then when they come and want to have a conversation with you about it, you've already thought about everything that you've written down and you'll be able to speak about it more clearly.
For sure. And that's part of the external processing that a lot of us need to do, whether it's talking things out, journaling things out, writing it down. It helps us take that crazy storm of thoughts that we have constantly going on in our heads and make sense of it. Because if it just stays in your head and you just keep ruminating about it, you're never going to make sense of it until you've actually taken the time to process it. And that's why, you know, it's so important to have like those conversations with your mentors, as you said, or like, you know, journaling is a very helpful activity, or just having those support systems in place for sure. I would like to add that, you know, with leadership roles, like, you know, it really comes down to the culture of the place that you're also trying to advance in, right? So, you know, some places, if you get passed over for promotions like Desiree did early in her career, it might not necessarily be a reflection on you per se. It might be a reflection of the employer or the individual themselves, and it might just be circumstance as well. So it's important to recognize and be really rooted in what you're good at, what your strengths are, what your values are, so that you can stay grounded during those times, and you can recognize opportunities where, you know, you'll have a better chance at it. And, you know, when put in the right environment, like, you know, you can really thrive. So, but knowing what you're looking for is key. And so that's really what we do as professionals. We help our clients, like, you know, process all of this information, make sense of it, so that, you know, you can really, you know, approach your professional development and your career with confidence and clarity. Yeah.
I
So
just
we're
want
just,
to add, oh,
go
I just
ahead.
want to add two stories to this. So my employers were a group of 10 men that loved sports. Okay. I'm not a sports person, never have been, but I think a part of like being in the corporate world is being able to adapt to who you're talking to. And I think that that's also part of imposter syndrome, is like, or maybe it's like mirroring who you're talking to. And sometimes that can be like really challenging and really create some confusion up there. But I found that I was able to really like mirror and understand like what my employers wanted, and they wanted somebody that could sit in a boardroom with them and talk sports for half the conversation and then business the other half. So I recognized that and knew that I needed to learn about it. So I would learn like a little bit, but then I would learn through them and ask them questions so that they could explain it to me. I don't know if I don't know, but that helped me, and it made me build a great relationship with my employers.
Mhm.
And I also learned about sports. The other thing that I want to mention too is because, like you said, it's about, you know, the culture of where you are. And again, the culture where I was heavily placed on sports. If you do get passed up for a promotion, there's a huge chance that like Veronica said, it's not on you, it's something else. And I remember there were two people up for a promotion to run a location, and one was a woman that was fantastic at the job. She was basically already doing the job, crushing it. I trained her myself, and she could have stepped into that role so flawlessly. And the other person that was up for the role um, was somebody who didn't have the experience, who wasn't qualified for the role, but he really knew about sports. And he always talked to the owners about sports. And he was the one that was chosen for that role. A couple months later, he ended up being let go from that role because he couldn't fulfill it. And then the other woman stepped in and did that role. So it's not my it's not always about you, and there's external circumstances, and that's a really hard thing to face. And an exercise that you can do with that is anytime you're feeling RSD in the workplace or anywhere, is to write down the situation, write down like why you feel that way. And then write down any like actual external supporting details of if the way that you're feeling is true, right? Because so often we're like, well, I didn't get this promotion because, well, I'm just terrible at my job and they don't like me. And, I said this. And so they probably didn't like me and blah, blah, blah. And we get down like this hole of like not loving ourselves and being so negative to ourselves. But then you need to write down the supporting reasons for it. Well, they've never said any of these things. I have no actual evidence or proof that they don't like me or that my feelings are true. Doesn't mean they're not valid, but it's a good exercise for some people to help you get out of that RSD mindset.
Absolutely. No, and that sounds very similar to cognitive behavioral therapy, which is like, really recognizing, your like really examining your thoughts and, making sure that they're balanced and, basing it in fact and really, scrutinizing and challenging your perception of things. And that can really go a long way in helping you survive and hopefully thrive in, these workplaces where, we're, not always going to have the luxury of, being our complete unmasked self, but rather it's still important, while we still need to do these things to survive in the workplace, we also need to put our own mental health first, and we need to set boundaries for ourselves and try and find that balance as best as we can. And that can only come when you do the work and you actually, invest in that part of yourself. So yeah, thank you so much for that, Desiree. And thank you so much for joining us today. I've learned so much, and I'm just skipping ahead here. I just want to mention a couple of things. If you're not already part of our Facebook group, and if you're on Facebook, we would love to have you join our group. It is a community of over 60,000 Facebook members now who are all neurodivergent professionals from around the world. And it's a great place to really get, insights on the experience of being neurodivergent in the workplace and, gain support like that. Let's see what else. I also do have a free training webinar that I'm happy to share in the chat in just a little bit. It is called Neurodivergent, Build a Sustainable Work Life and Break the Neurodivergent Burnout Cycle. So if any of that burnout talk or, trying to build a more sustainable work life talk really resonated with you, definitely check that out. It is a free training video, and it's very helpful, I'm sure, and it will help you start going through some of those things that I talked about getting to know yourself, your strengths, your limitations, and help you find clarity on, what you need to do next in your work and line of work. With that said, thank you so much for coming. And Desiree, do you have anything else you'd like to say before we wrap up?
No, just thank you so much to everyone for being here. And thanks again, Veronica, for inviting me today.
It's been amazing, and it's so great to see an example of somebody who is informed about different neurodiversity and different people's needs, and so committed to helping people do their best in the workplace. And hopefully this talk will inspire a little bit of good in the world in that direction. So everybody, I'll be around for another couple of minutes, but feel free to talk in the chat if you have any questions. I'll put some links in there, but have a great day. Thank you, everybody.